Um, Thank you. So, thank you everybody for joining this street outreach hurricane preparation meeting. This is really just to try and make sure that we have a really clear and coordinated plan for ensuring that our neighbors without homes, particularly those who are street homeless, have access to information and resources before the storms come in, when we are really, really facing that storm coming in. And then maybe even some follow up afterwards. So, for today, we are really, really going to focus on that pre storm outreach. So, when we get down to brass taxes and the storm is coming our way. So, again, anybody who hasn't, if you could please put your name, your role within your agency, and your contact information in the chat, I would appreciate it. And if your agency is doing outreach, if you could put some information in the chat about that as well, it would be very helpful. Um, so we are, again, here to make sure that we have a coordinated approach to outreach during hurricanes. Last year, we realized that there was definite, of course, we knew there was definite coordination going on for the storms, but there were some places where we were actually overlapping and some areas where there were gaps as well. So we really want to try and address that as efficiently and effectively as possible this year. I don't expect that we are ever going to cover every square inch of Pinellas County because it is a surprisingly big county. But if we can cover as much of it as possible, that'll benefit us and our community moving forward. So some of what we identified last year is that there are teams who go out into the community, particularly our active street outreach teams. And for the purposes of this conversation, when we talk about active street outreach teams, we are talking about those teams who are coordinated within the CoC, the continuum of care, to go out and do what we call official street outreach, such as the City of Clearwater, the City of Largo, the City of St. Petersburg, Metropolitan Ministries, and a few other partners throughout Pinellas County. There are other outreach efforts as well, though, that are really part of this equation. So if your team isn't part of that official street outreach work, but does have regular engagement with our folks experiencing homelessness, either in a stationary location or throughout the community, or if your team is able to participate in actual street level outreach during the storm, it's really important that we know that we know who all of the players are, and that we know what folks' capacity is. And that's really how we'll make sure that we aren't duplicating efforts and we are filling as many gaps as possible. So, of course, there are municipal overlaps and there are municipal gaps. There are also some gaps in how we communicate, which have really been identified in part thanks to the help of our Lived Experience Advisory Committee, who really drove home the fact that without written communication, sharing information about transportation opportunities, and open storm shelters, a lot of folks were left out of the communication equation. Having a list of storm shelters available online is wonderful for most of us. I have two phones, thanks to work and personal. I have two phones in my hand at almost all time. I always have access to the internet. That is not the case for a lot of our folks on the street, though. So this year, we are trying to make sure that we have that storm information pamphlet that we kind of started putting out last year, right as the storm was approaching, available to all of our partners so that as soon as those storm shelters are posted, we can share that PDF with you. You can print it out and you can hit the ground running. So we want to make sure that everybody knows that that is coming through the pipeline, that everybody has an opportunity to see it. Our Lived Experience Advisory Committee has weighed in on this, but I would appreciate this group weighing in as well to make sure that this information makes sense for you, for your outreach, for your community, and is something that you can easily print and distribute. So that's really a long-winded overview of what we're doing here today. And I know that we have a number of folks on the call who actively engage in outreach during storms and regularly. And so I will start from the HLA point of view. I know we're not on the top of that list, but I'm going to start with the HLA outreach and what we do. So during storms, the HLA, which is the lead agency in the Pinellas Continuum of Care, we, of course, coordinate those provider meetings. So everybody on this call should receive invitations to virtual meetings every day before, during, and after storms so that we can, on a large scale, coordinate just general service, outreach, and recovery efforts. We also contact everybody who is on our mailing lists. We are constantly sharing information with providers via email. We are reaching out to folks on the shelter prioritization list via phone and email to ensure that they are contacted and that they know what is going on, what resources are available. And then, based on need within the community and staff capacity and availability, and of course, the safety, our staff may be available to go out onto the street and distribute some information that way as well, based on, again, need and capacity. So that's really what the HLA has to support direct outreach efforts. And again, we are, of course, doing regular social media updates. We are sending daily emails and things like that. But to make sure that we are reaching our folks who don't have access to email, maybe don't have access to text or phone regularly, we want to make sure that we do have that street outreach communication and coordination as well. So that is really what the HLA is doing here. And of course, we're trying to make sure that everybody is coordinated. With that in mind, I would like to put some folks on the spot. I hope that that is okay, by asking what your storm-related outreach plans are. Not necessarily what your overall street outreach plans are, but when it comes to right before a storm is coming, we know it is coming, the shelters are opening, PSTA is doing free rides to the shelter. What is your outreach plan? Is it just your team? Are we bringing in other members of your team? For instance, I'll talk about the City of St. Pete as an example. Is it just the street outreach team with the City of St. Pete? Is it also all of law enforcement? Are there other members of the City of St. Pete team getting involved in that as well to do that direct street outreach? So that's really kind of, I'm hoping to get a little bit of information and a little bit of coloring from folks to get a better picture of what we are doing. You are welcome to put that information in the chat, but if there's anybody who would like to come off mute and share a little bit about what your team is doing, I would really appreciate it. And for the sake of not putting people directly on the spot, because chat is a totally fair option, if you are one of the agencies listed on this list, if I could ask if there's anybody on that list who would like to come off mute and talk about what you're doing a little bit, I'd appreciate that. Thanks, Helen.
Hi, Victoria, since you put us out there first.
Sorry.
So what I will say, I'm Helen Ryan to the City of St. Petersburg. For us, right before the storm, it is City of St. Pete Outreach. It's all our social service teams. There's 3 girls in a car. We also use our PAC unit, which is Police Assisting the Homeless. There's 6 officers and their sergeant. They help us out if they're not assigned to a different area. Just kind of depends on what's going on. We also are part of a bigger department, which is Housing and Community Development. They also will sometimes give staff member code enforcement. Will give staff members for us to really go out and saturate the city. We, from one point of the city to the other, look for our unhoused neighbors. And at that point, we're really just letting them know, hey, there's a storm. We try to do it as soon as we know their shelters are open. So even if the city is closed, we will still be out giving that information. We also not only touch our unhoused neighbors, but we touch areas that are vulnerable. So if there are evacuation orders, we knock kind of door to door, same teams, knock door to door saying, hey, it's mandatory evacuation if that happens. Really giving them the information that's available that they might not be able to, everybody doesn't have access to social media, whatever channels that the information might be dispersed. So we kind of do that door to door knocking before the storms. Excuse me. We also do some coordination with Pinellas County sometimes. Like if we go to, I'll just use like St. Vincent de Paul. We've been there a couple times, and because they have the outside courtyard area, there's some people outside in that area, or people that kind of just hang out in front of St. Vincent de Paul for food or other services. If we connect with a large enough group, especially if they are disabled and not able to use PSTA, we do some coordination to try to make sure that they're able to get to a safe space. I know Shanice and April are on, so if I'm missing something, feel free to jump in. I will say, I said we start passing out information. We start having conversations as soon as it looks like there might be something coming this way. What we've been surprised by individuals in our city that didn't know that there was a storm coming. We walked all of downtown and people didn't know that there was a storm coming before. And so that's why the kind of ramped up effort with other departments being involved, because just the three of us, even including PATH, we could not get the entire city. And it is specific to our city of St. Pete area.
Thank you, Helen. That is fantastic and very helpful. And it sounds like y'all are able to cover a lot of St. Pete with a lot of support from other team members.
Right. So we're divided into teams depending upon what's going on. So it's not always our team. We have a little conversation beforehand, just how to what information to share, how to share information, what happens if you encounter someone who is unhoused, who really doesn't want to go to shelter, kind of how to have that conversation with individuals, because these are not team members that on a day-to-day basis might encounter unhoused neighbors. So we have those conversations first. And then, we do, just depending upon who's available and what it looks like the impact is going to be.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Are there any other agencies? And again, of course, you are welcome to put the information in chat, but are there any other agencies that would like to come off mute to share some information?
I can share, and Lucero can back me up on whatever I might miss. But traditionally, this is John Paul with Metropolitan Ministries Brigade. Traditionally, what our response is, and the three counties we serve in, is, electronically we'll compile all of the county storm shelter information into one mass email, send it out to all our contacts, which include clients, partners, and other community members. So electronically, we do that. But again, mirroring Helen, is as soon as we have an indication that storms are approaching, we start having that conversation of, if you have a device, this is where you get the electronic communications from. Some of the counties have pre-registration for special needs or pet shelters. So we try to get folks registered for those. Throughout the year, we'll try to have those conversations with folks to make sure that they get the information if they have that device. But once storms are announced, we'll deploy the outreach teams in areas as strategically as we can be to make sure that we're getting the information distributed to people in person. But it's really dependent upon, because we don't want folks going to the shelters if they're not opening. Because there have been times where there looks like it's coming and then it doesn't last minute. So until it is announced and it's open, then we can get out and inform in person. But I would like to know if, looking at the division of the county and how it's broken up. And I'm sure that is probably what we're doing here today as part of this is dividing out, like, can we pre-organize once the announcement is made, this group is going to tackle this area, this group's going to tackle this area. Can we parse it out that way? And I think another good point of data usage is to look at point in time count data as to where those hotspots are, to identify how close are those to the shelters, and do we need to make sure that we have large groups focusing on those areas when the shelters are activated. So again, street outreach, of course, I know Lucera and her team were always happy to go where the need is and do the needful. So Lucera, did I miss anything?
No, sir, you covered that.
Thanks.
Thank you, John Paul and Lazare. Can I say that it is wonderful to see y'all once again? And I absolutely, so I definitely want to, once we have some more information after this meeting, take it and really kind of make a plan for where people are covering to identify where our gaps are and how we can maybe help supplement and fill those. So absolutely. Thank you so much for your information and for participating. Are there any other agencies that would like to come off mute or put their information in the chat so that we can make sure that we are getting that information? And by the way, if you're not going to share this information with me right now, I want you to know I'll be following up in an email and ask for this information later so that I can account for it. So it's speak now or hear from me later.
Hey, Victoria, it's Zach.
Hey.
So as far as countywide coverage, it depends on the storm, how we engage the storm. Depends on what category it's coming in at, what it's perceived to be. Is the safe harbor shelter going to evacuate? Is it not? So if the shelter is going to remain open, like it's category 1 or just tropical storm, then we'll keep our street outreach teams on the street and they'll ride out with law enforcement and just go try to find every homeless person that they can and encourage them to seek shelter, get in the car, get up to safe harbor. Once it goes out that the evacuation shelters are opening and if safe harbor is closing, then we do the same thing, but we do it with only our law enforcement. What happens is the sheriff deems all non-essential staff the ability to go home and only basically certified law enforcement stay on duty. And so what we do is we blanket the county and just look for anybody that appears to be sleeping on the street or without shelter, and just encourage them to get up to one of the evacuation shelters as soon as possible. Even if we evacuate safe harbor, what we do is we keep members here, myself and somebody else will hang out as long as it's safe in order to get people to appropriate and safe shelter. Because we've had them walking up within minutes of impending storms and we're like, hey, where'd you come from? And they're like, I walked here from Pasco County. And I'm like, okay, hop in this van. I'm going to get you to an evacuation site. So safe harbor is obviously widely known by the entire area. So people will show up here even though we've evacuated. So we make sure that we got staff on duty here ready to get them transported to evacuation shelter. We've got, I don't know, 1,000-ish of the blue pamphlets that Human Services gives out. So we're ready to start distributing information and making sure people are educated that we find out on the street.
Thank you very much, Lieutenant Haish. I appreciate that. Are there any other of our municipal partners that would like to share a little bit about what y'all do for storm outreach?
Good morning. Todd Upper from the city of Largo. It just, as Lieutenant Haish has said, it just depends on what type of storm we're seeing or if there's any, solid information on, what kind of factors are going to hit the area. We definitely work with the officers to make sure that they're all in tuned on, if they run into somebody in the community to let them know. I'm the only outreach specialist here, but we have two officers, Officer Stamper and Officer Melandra, that work with me and coincide, kind of figuring out what our plan is going to be. But it definitely gets out with the other officers so they know if they run into somebody where we're going. definitely reach out to a lot of the folks that I know because I know the community very well, on who, once you get that information out, it does turn into the phone tag. The information gets shared quite quickly, especially in our community here in Largo. The other factor is as we get closer to it, I'm deployed at the Largo High School shelter with the officers and with the principals and everybody else that come in to kind of work collaboratively to support the community. It's a Category 5 building, so we get a lot of folks coming to that one. We work, right up to the storm. We can work on making sure the information's out there and that that the unhoused folks in the community are knowledgeable. And we still have officers out, right before the storms, looking for folks, to help me have more fingers or branches out there in the community. And then, obviously I'm housed, with the folks at Largo High School, for the duration of the storm. And then after I do stay, to work on the reintegration back out into the community or work on plans or step down or whatever would work with Dominique and her planning. So we kind of work side by side, and try to make sure that we can help her efforts and trying to get the community back, the folks back into the community or back into the next step in their program in housing. So that's kind of what we're doing. It has changed and morphed over the couple of years I've been with the city. We're becoming more efficient at it. But we're always learning and growing with every storm. Last year was quite a learning curve because of two storms almost in a row. So we're getting better in tune on what the community needs. And I'm definitely going to be looking at some more creative ways here in the next few weeks to try to make sure the unhoused population is well informed. So that's kind of where we are at right now.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And thank you for the shout out for Dominique and Pinellas County Human Services and Emergency Management Team. They do a lot of work. I can't understate that. A lot of work. Thanks. That's fantastic. Are there any other agencies that would like to share with us? Not
Hey, this is Dominique. This is
Yes.
Dominique. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. I'm joining from, I'm actually off today, so I apologize. But I realized the importance of this meeting, so I wanted to participate, so I kind of limited participation. But I missed part of the introduction, but I just want to discuss, thank you everyone for being able to come and be a part of this conversation. Everyone does it a little bit differently, and I think we've kind of, there's strengths to how every team is doing this. I joined when Metro was talking and really trying to understand and get that kind of unified coverage. I know that's kind of been happening naturally. It's been happening through the street outreach minimum standards. I don't know where we are in that process, but they was working on a map and kind of the layers of who's where and when. And hopefully that can be integrated into part of this process of who's where and when. The other thing that was mentioned by quite a few different teams is that everyone has different kind of activation moments and deactivation moments. And so I really want to try and get a better understanding of that because Todd was just speaking, he gets pivoted over to a shelter while, Pinellas County Sheriff, I know Clearwater will actually, take their civilians offline and they're actually not able to go out anymore. So how does that pivot with the various teams that are on board and part of this discussion? So I want to thank everyone again for what you're doing and the work that you do, every day, but also in the time of emergencies and planning. So thanks again.
Thanks for joining us from vacation, Dominique. I hope that you and your family are having a wonderful time. Dominique, I told her she wouldn't hear from me while she was on vacation, and now she's going to listen to me for an hour. But thank you very much. Are there any other agencies that would like to share in their outreach before we kind of move forward? And again, if you're not sharing with me now, I'm reaching out to you later.
I can for directions. We are very similar. I mean, our teams will go out, but we will follow. I mean, if our agency is closing, our outreach team would not be out on the streets. So our work would be mostly in preparation for prior to. I mean, we have a whole e-coop that we follow here, and then as the agency shuts, then our teams would come in. But they would be available to cover and support anybody out doing outreach anywhere in Pinellas County where there is a need. prior to and doing the planning piece of it. You know, getting the word out, prior to it getting to where the agency shuts. So we're flexible in that way. We could really, like, if there's a gap, I mean, we have somebody that's always out in Treasure Island and Gulfport, which, you know, I didn't see, like, that's not really on one of the main pieces, but we have our person out there. So he would be really dedicated to that, committed to that. But the other three that we have would be pretty flexible to move where there was a need.
If I can add too, this is Lucero with Metro Brigade. We typically coordinate with Suzanne and she'll reach out to me and let me know like what areas aren't covered. So we typically go to those areas if I can dispatch my team out there so we can, you know, obviously let folks know of the shelters and what's going on and try to provide some items for them to get through the storm.
That's wonderful. Thank you. And absolutely knowing what teams are available to be flexible and help fill in some of those gaps are a huge, huge part of this equation because some teams have very specific areas that they cover. For instance, the city of St. Pete does a great job covering the city of St. Pete. But of course, because they're the city, they're limited to the city. So making sure that there are folks covering areas right outside of the city is incredibly important. So thank you very much, Lucero and Michelle, for that. I also appreciate the conversation that's happening in the chat, of course. Thank you, Meg, for making sure that you're sharing information constantly with folks who are coming into the library, you know, unhoused. And ensuring that our libraries are part of this, I think, is a big part of the equation as well, because there's a lot of information that gets shared and a lot of people who rely on the libraries as a resource. So thank you very much for adding that information as well. Any other agencies that would like to share?
Sorry, I was doing a transport earlier, so I couldn't respond.
Hey, Kathy.
So the quicker we get the flyer that lets us know officially when everything is open and ready to go, then in the city of Clearwater, we actually print out massive amounts of flyers, and then they're posted in all the convenience stores, laundromats, anywhere that people in the community, not just those that are unhoused, but all of our neighbors then have access to that, because not everybody does have cell phones and internet. They may be out trying to gather things and not realize that they're actually in evacuation zone, or those zones are now, and they're thinking about prepping at home. So we can try to get them out, and then again, just notifying not just the downtown bike team that works with me, the 10 officers, but then the whole police department knows, and they'll be out as long as it's safe for them to get out. And then of course I have my cutoff time as a civilian when I'm mandatory to be off. So up until the time that they cut me off, you know, then I'm out making sure that everyone knows. And then of course, if I know the sleeping sites and stuff, we're hitting those and trying to get out to any encampments that we know, so that we can try to get those, you know, the ones that are already cleared and you know they're still out there, to try to encourage them to get into a shelter as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Kathy. Thank you very much. And I think to kind of add on to a lot of what I'm hearing and some suggestions from John Paul and Dominique, I'm going to send out a follow-up after this to get a little bit more specific information. I want to know when everybody's civilian cutoff time is, so that I can say, hey, you can potentially have this assistance until this time. That's really good information. How many people will be available for that kind of assistance, that kind of thing. So you will be hearing from me after this. Helen?
So I didn't speak to that because I think that will be different depending upon what's going on for everybody. Like I kind of spoke to it a little bit in saying that just because the city is closed doesn't mean that we are working. So everyone probably we're considered, well, my team is now emergency critical. So we will work when the city is closed. That cutoff time could be different than what other civilians and or people might be doing, just depending upon what is going on. Like I believe one of the storms we didn't leave till 2 o'clock in the afternoon and it started raining at 2:30, 3 o'clock, right? And so I think that will be very hard to pinpoint for a lot of teams. It will really depend on what is going on. I think that will determine when even government agency or regular or nonprofit agency, I think that will determine when they pull people off. Or to Michelle's point, like if DFL is closed, then their street outreach isn't working and they're closed, which is why we don't pull them in. Why we don't pull them into our street outreach, recognizing that there are other areas that might need street outreach. If we absolutely couldn't transport someone, they couldn't get there, then that would be a difference. But that's why we don't pull them in, because we recognize that they could be closed and we can't say you all have to work, but we do have to work. And it's really dependent. Like each kind of manager, director, administrator will set that depending upon what's going on. So that will be hard to pinpoint.
I agree. No, go ahead.
I would also like to say that I think I can only speak for Largo, obviously, but our capacity for our work changes. It changes as it gets closer to the storm because we need to prep the facility, Largo High School. And then depending on the storm, we have transitioning coming from Pinellas Hope, and folks moving into the facility to get away from the storm. So my capacity is outreach, but then it goes to actual on the ground, on site, caring of the community during the storm, right before the storm, transitioning in, and after the storm. So there is still some outreach because we can still go out and get folks off the streets and bring them to the shelter, but that capacity kind of changes to a primary worker or employee of the city trying to make sure that the facility's ready, and the transitioning of we had 2,700 or whatever folks and assisting with, obviously the principal at Largo High School and their staff, and Dominique and her team, and all the other folks that come in. So you kind of have a collaborative going on. So it's hard for us to pinpoint that because we're working right up to the storm, and then our capacity changes to facility, and then after transitioning. So it would be hard to pinpoint when, I'm not available, because it depends on what my capacity is at that time. Before the storm, I could be out in the street doing outreach, or somebody could call us and we go out and pick them up. That's happened a bunch of times. But also I have a dual role to make sure I'm helping with assisting with people coming into the shelter.
Yeah, and that definitely makes sense. Thank you all for that feedback. This feedback will make it much easier for me to put something together to try and gather as much of this information into a document as possible. Understanding, of course, that variances happen, but I really do appreciate that feedback. I think that's incredibly valuable. So thank you. Speaking of, go ahead. Hey, Dominique.
I'm sorry. It's hard on the phone. I never ever use the phone to call in. Okay, so the other thing I was going to mention is, obviously we start doing those daily calls, and I've kind of coordinated outreach, kind of and then everyone's kind of on their own, which is why HLA has stepped up, and like Suzanne did a lot of that coordination last year. But I want to include you guys, start including kind of the updates, the status of outreach teams on the daily calls. I think that will help with kind of this discussion that we're having. I mean, we can have some general ideas like this happens until this point, this happens until this point, but understanding like what those points are and like on those daily calls. So I'm just giving you guys a heads up that I want to start including you guys as far as like where your status is on participation and in the community or at a facility or offline, and then maybe potentially incorporating like how you guys can augment or divert staffing and things like that as part of those daily calls. So just FYI, thanks.
I think that is a fantastic idea. Y'all heard it here, so don't feel put on the spot if a storm comes around and Dominique's asking you to read out about your outreach efforts. So thank you. All right, excellent. Please, of course, continue to share your outreach efforts and things like that in the chat as we move forward to talking about how we share information and materials. So we've talked about the fact that the information is available online. There is a lot of information available online. The county does a great job of putting that information up. Municipalities do a really good job of sharing that information. The CoC has it on their website as well. And of course, we're sharing things on social media and whatnot and via email. That is all fantastic. And by the way, if you have email addresses that you would like us to add to our daily provider coordination calls, or that you would like us to add to our community outreach emails so that we can share that information in mass, please send them to me. Please send them to Megan. We will happily add folks to those lists. But we really want to talk about how we are communicating with folks that don't have that internet or phone access, because that has been a real point of concern for people. So, Megan, if you wouldn't mind, could you pull up that draft form that we have so folks can see it? We did last year create and start sharing a PDF that people are welcome to print and share for street outreach or to hang up in the library, in laundromats, things like that. And so this is what the form looks like. We've gotten a little bit of feedback from our lived experience advisory committee on the content and things like that in here as well, so that we can make sure we're sharing the best information possible. The deal here is that this information cannot be shared until Pinellas County announces open hurricane shelters. Somebody mentioned earlier that we don't want to send people to hurricane shelters that are not open. And so we have to wait until that information is posted by the county, and then we can share this information publicly. As soon as that happens, we will share that via the CoC's website, via social media, and via email. And we would like to share it directly with the outreach leaders as well. So there are a few things I want to talk about here. First off, does this make sense? Do you have feedback for this approach to this flyer or to this document? Happy to take that either here in the meeting, in the chat, or via email later. And then secondly, is your team able to, during the storm, because the shelters aren't announced weeks ahead of time. We are talking a couple of days, one day ahead of time. Is your team able to print and distribute this? And does it help you along your way as you're doing this direct outreach? Is there anybody who would like to provide some feedback here?
Yeah, once if you guys blast it out in that the group that you and Dominique have been talking about, or however you get it to us, that'll be part of the spiel when we're engaging people. I'll get it out to patrol and we'll get it out to our street outreach folks so that anybody that's coming, anybody that we come in contact with has the appropriate information. That's fine. That's easy. We can print.
Right, and also keeping it on that white paper is way better for us that are trying to print out stuff, because when you guys put that on pretty blue paper and all that, it wastes our ink and it doesn't come out good whenever we try to print it out to make flyers to post out in the community. So thank you very much for the white background.
On that note, we've started adding some white cold night shelter flyers as well, because that is a problem, and I am sorry for your ink.
Well, no, right. So it comes out gray paper and it just massive amounts, and unfortunately everyone is on a budget, so our ink is costly. So yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So thank you. I want to make sure that this is accessible. Or is there any other feedback, or are there concerns from folks about this?
Hey, Victoria, this is Nick Mara from Pinellas County Emergency Management.
Hey, Nick.
Hey, just feedback on the registration part. So registration is not required. It's only required if someone would need transportation. And that transportation would be to somebody, to a location if somebody had a fixed address. So for this group, anyone who qualifies for special needs shelters, they can be dropped off there at the special needs shelters. And same with pet friendly. There's no pre-registration process for pets, or so I think you could just remove that whole thing right there. I think it's important for the street outreach teams to be able to understand if they're going to bring someone to a special needs shelter that they qualify. And I've worked with Dominique to create a checklist that provides those type of medical conditions that will qualify somebody. But if someone has a pet or if they don't qualify for special needs, then they can just be dropped off right at any of our open shelters.
Wonderful. While we have you, Nick, I thought that I had heard, and please correct me if I am wrong, that the pre-registration for the special needs for transportation and whatnot will end 5 days before the storm this year. Is that correct, or am I making that up?
That is not correct. So
Okay.
what we do is we pull the form. So we have the form online that people will try to fax and mail it to us. So what we do is we pull the form that is printable and our online form off of our website, and we tell people to call to register. So in 5 days, people are no longer able to mail anything in, but they can call our number and they can register right up until we start pulling the buses off the roads. But I think if this is going to be going to folks who are on the street, then they don't qualify to be registered in the program because you have to have a fixed address.
Thank you very much for that. I appreciate that. It's all very good information and will help us update that. So thank you. Any other thoughts, feedback, Helen?
More question for Nick. I came off mute because that's what I was thinking, but more question for Nick, and not sure how the shelters do it. But for shelters that they know they have individuals, like they're in an evacuation zone, they know they have individuals there who are disabled and would need help evacuating. Do shelters already sign people up? Do they have to? I'm asking more because I know we were at St. Vincent de Paul with quite a few individuals that were needing help because they were disabled. They were in wheelchairs. They, in the shelter or in the courtyard. And so I'm just wondering, since it is hurricane season, if shelters know that we have these individuals, these 10 individuals who are disabled, and we are in evacuation zone A or whatever that limit looks like, right? That they do sign them up in advance so that outreach then isn't out there trying to coordinate
Absolutely.
that at that moment.
Yeah, so there's two sides of this. So we work directly with shelters that are going to be evacuating, and we send PSTA buses to them, and we work with their coordinators to tell us how many of them need to go to a general population shelter or how many people need to go to special needs. And we actually work directly with the shelters to send buses, and that's separate from the special needs program. So no shelters need to register anyone, and then no street outreach team, no one needs to be registered because we work directly with the shelters to provide transportation. And then folks, folks who are on the street, they're going to have to rely on getting on a PSTA bus or being picked up from one of your street outreach teams and being brought to one of the shelters. So there's the street side, and then the shelter side. We do work directly with any evacuating shelters to get them to shelters, and we work with the coordinators to determine. So if they do have, we ask them how many folks are special needs at your shelter, and we make sure that we send a bus and get them to a special needs shelter. So there are folks who have special needs in your shelters or in the shelters in the county, and we definitely account for them and make sure we get them to the right spot.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Outside of that, I would say the registration, I agree with Lucerno, like in short, would be perfect if we got this like really quickly. As soon as we knew there was an evacuation zone or hurricane shelters were open, then we would print this and get this out.
Fantastic. Thank you. On that note, for communicating, for ensuring that we are getting it to folks as quickly as possible, of course, we will email it to everybody. Everybody on this call will receive this in a PDF via email. But when it comes to sharing information, talking about issues that pop up during the day, if, for instance, there is an update, let's let's put this out into the world that it's not going to happen. But let's say something happens at a shelter that has opened, the hurricane shelter has to close, and then folks are pivoted to a different location. So the locations have changed. As far as that's not going to happen, we're putting it out into the world that it's not going to happen, but just in case, making sure that we have the ability to communicate with each other while we are all out into the thick of things and maybe aren't looking at our email every 30 minutes. I want to make sure that there is an easy way to communicate. Last year, our team did try setting up a Slack chat that a few people got access to. Slack is a service kind of like a WhatsApp where teams can just come together and have easy communication, kind of mass texting. Is that the best approach? Would a Teams chat that everybody could maybe access from their phone during the day be accessible to most people on this call? I just want to make sure that there is a way to quickly share information, kind of like via text, if not exactly via text, with street outreach folks and with your outreach teams. So that we can as quickly as possible share information. And it's even better if we have that set up so that, for instance, if I keep picking on the city of St. Pete, Helen, it's your face is up on the top of my screen, so I'm thinking about you. But let's say I invite Helen and accidentally forget to add April to that list, so that Helen can easily add April to that list, so that Helen can add Shawnice to that list, so that when Carly says, hey, I'm available to assist, Helen says, all right, I will add you to this chat so that you have all the best information. Is Teams chat the best platform for this? Or does anybody else have a different suggestion? Because I don't know what the best answer is there. All right, let me try this way. Is there anybody on this call who cannot access a Teams chat while in the field? Not hearing any. All right.
So I think that Teams might be okay to try. I wouldn't try it on the spot. So like if you just sent a test to Teams,
Yep.
I think that'd be fine. But I also want to recognize that government agencies are a little funny with outside things if we're not on a meeting at that time, right? Or if you try to include us in a group from my phone, I might not be able to figure out how to get it in the moment at that time. I appreciated that you're able to add people into Teams. And so it seems like it might be the easier. I will tell you, Slack, trying to download another app at that moment we can't do it, especially if you're using a government issued phone, like one of our city issued cell phones. I happen to use my personal cell phone, but I know my team members use their city issued cell phone. You can't download any extra apps to it at that time. And so that's why I said I would prefer email. It's quicker for me to disseminate it to a larger group of people versus and let them determine who's going to do what versus trying to find it in a place. It is easier when you're on Teams in a meeting to get that information, but not not when you're not in a meeting. Sometimes I don't see the alerts from outside agencies until I get an email, and then I have to go find it.
And I have to agree with Helen on that because, like, I'm the only outreach, right? And I have my sergeants and stuff, but then they have other things that they do, so they're not included on these. And I monitor that when I'm off duty. Like when they say my cutoff is done, I'm done, but I'm at home and I'll keep my phone. And it's easier for me to take that email that you guys are sending, and then I can disperse it out all the way up to the head if I have to until I reach whoever is available to me. Because they have different levels of who's out and doing what based on what the city deems as liability and risk for employees to be out. So it's easier for me, as with Helen, to get that email and send it out.
Okay, that definitely makes sense. So, email as a primary, and then we will try a Slack to see who can access it and maybe identify some of the gaps from there. But we will absolutely make sure that any updates and everything like that are coming through email, as well as probably a Teams message. But I'm not gonna hold us to Teams message until we figure that out. But I'll make sure.
Slack an app? Is Slack an app?
I
don't know. Well, then we won't be able to download it.
Yeah, so if
it's going to be something, then Teams would have to be it.
Yeah.
I would think that the majority of people have access to Teams, but if Slack is an app, we would not be able to download it on our city issued cell phones.
Yeah, when that started last, was that last Helene or one of them that you guys tried to do a Slack thing? Yeah, they wouldn't. I tried to get Slack put on the phones and they wouldn't let us. So we're in the same boat.
Yeah. So it looks like there's 22 people registered in that chat. Helen, I think you're one of them. I don't know how you got it, but that was the reason why I created that, and I tried it because Teams was not an option due to the barriers of sending out or creating like an actual thread with municipalities or those that are government officials. And also there are others that don't have any type of program like that. I believe Officer Copeland, like he wouldn't be able to go on to, like Teams. I don't even think he has it, right? So that's why I tried out this Slack. I'm sure that there are other options. I don't know how we would be able to cross the barrier with Teams due to those restrictions that some agencies have with receiving group chats.
Yeah.
Hey, this is Dominique. It's my understanding that the biggest Teams limitation is really going into the settings and turning on notifications when you're doing a channel like that. So those who get the email like 6 hours later that say, hey, you missed this chat, or because we do Teams chats with various departments and with internal and external. So I would try something now rather than when the storm's coming. So like, let's test it now and see who's getting it or who's not getting it with whatever process is decided.
Agreed. Thank you, everybody, for that feedback. I really appreciate it. I know that, like, what method of communication are we going to use? It seems like a really easy thing, but it's really important that we have this talked out and worked through. So thank you very much for that feedback. Email will definitely be a primary point of contact or primary method of contact, but we will create and try out a Teams chat with everybody on this call. And if there are folks that are not on this call that you want to make sure we're adding to the list, please make sure that you send us their information as well. So fantastic. So as far as my list of things go, this is really the bulk of what I wanted to talk about. Are you able to distribute this information? Do you have feedback on this information? And how can we best communicate with each other? I will, again, be sending out a follow-up. You'll get a Teams chat invitation, and I will send out a follow-up via email to hopefully get a little bit more specific information so that we can identify, again, the gaps and the areas that we can work together to kind of fill those gaps. But before we go, are there any needs, suggestions, or concerns that anybody wants to talk about while we're all together?
Victoria, I dropped it in the chat, but I would think that it probably should be disseminated to a bigger group than us to allow for people working on different assignments and for people determining where their people are going to work and how they're going to work. Because we are cognizant of the fact that like there are people that live in evacuation zone A. So when they have to evacuate, like we are required to be ready before, like we would send our emergency critical people home to do certain things to get themselves ready. But if they have to evacuate, they have to evacuate. And so If it's sent out to a larger group, and I don't know what that larger group looks like, if that's the larger group of everybody that's invited to the HLA call, or if that's all providers, whatever that, I don't know what that larger group looks like, right? But if it's sent out to a larger group, that helps people make better decisions, I guess, or the best decision for their agency.
I appreciate that. And absolutely, we will make sure that the information is disseminated to all providers and community members that we are able to. And then we will reach out to the larger group as well to kind of find out maybe who is available and how we can fill in some gaps as well. So I really appreciate that, Helen. Thank you. And then information, Meg asked about sharing information about heat resources. This is actually something that the Lived Experience Committee officers and I were just chatting about yesterday. So we are working on trying to pull together some resources. Megan with HLA just put in the chat the CoC website. There is some information for hot weather resources shared there. So some safety information, tips and tricks for staying safe in the extreme heat, as well as some information about aquatic centers, pools, recreation centers, local libraries, and things like that, where people can go and cool down. And then I am happy to say that we are also working on putting together some hot weather kits again this year. So outreach providers, you'll be receiving an email from me relatively soon to set up pickup time so that you can come and get your kits and dispense them. They'll have things like electrolyte packets, water bottles, hats, sunscreen, things like that in them as well. So thank you. And then, of course, for our last CoC info session, hot weather was covered. The Florida Department of Health in Pinellas County came and talked about that, did a 10 to 15 minute presentation that is also available through that link that Megan shared. So please share that information and that presentation with as many folks as possible. Excellent. Oh, and thank you, Megan, as well, for sharing the summer health fair that is happening July 29th in St. Petersburg. Pinellas County is hosting this, and they will be addressing a lot of hot weather information and resources as well. So the information about that is in the chat too. Anything else that anybody would like to discuss while we are all here together?
Yeah, I also wanted to mention if anyone else needs those blue resource cards prior to the storm, we are working on distributing those as well as hurricane guides. So please reach out to me directly. And then when communication and technology goes offline, sometimes text and other resources, we try all different types of resourcing to try and connect with you all. So if anyone is new to your department, new leadership that I don't have contacts for, please send those over to me so I have those for your departments and your sections so that I'm able to communicate with you guys. After the storm, after the last storm, it was kind of hard to get phone signal, but texting was working pretty well for most of you. So that was a great example of why it's so important for me to be able to reach out. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you, and have a wonderful vacation, Dominique. All right. Anything else for the good of the group before we all go on with our Wednesdays? No? All right. Well, it's 12:30 on the dot. I think we did pretty well with time. Thank you all for participating. Please, again, be on the lookout for a follow-up that will come from me or Megan here at the HLA. And then, of course, be on the lookout if storms are coming through. You will be invited to meetings and you will receive information via email from us there. So thank you all for participating, and I will talk to you soon. Thank you.